What if I told you that most people over 50 aren't getting wiser, they're just getting older? Here's the harsh reality. After decades of life experience, the majority have stopped learning, stopped questioning, and started coasting on outdated beliefs. But there's a small group who breaks this pattern. Today, I'm going to show you 9 signs that separate truly intelligent people over 50 from everyone else. And by the end, you'll know exactly which category you fall into. Welcome back to the Logic Room, where philosophy meets practice. There's a dangerous myth in our culture that age automatically brings wisdom. We assume that someone who's lived 50, 60, or 70 years must know better. But Stanford neuroscience research reveals something shocking. While our brains can continue developing through neuroplasticity at any age, most people's brains actually stop growing after 50. Why? Because they fall into what I call the experience trap. They mistake repetition for insight and confuse stubbornness with conviction. Real intelligence after 50 isn't about how much you've seen. It's about whether you're still willing to learn, adapt, and admit you're wrong. And that's exactly what separates the top 5% from everyone else. Let's find out where you stand. Sign 1. You're comfortable saying, "I don't know." The Dunning-Kruger Effect shows that incompetent people are overconfident, while truly intelligent people are full of doubt. An MIT study found that the smartest people say, "I don't know," more than anyone else. Most people over 50 think, "I've lived long enough to know how the world works." Intelligent people think, "I've lived long enough to realize how much I still don't understand." When your ego becomes rigid, your brain stops growing. If you can say, "I don't know," without feeling threatened, you're ahead of 80% of your age group. Sign 2. You willingly change your mind. You abandon beliefs you've held for decades when presented with better evidence. Carl Jung said, "Thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge." Intelligent people do 3 things. 1. Actively seek opposing viewpoints to test their thinking. 2. Say, "I was wrong," without shame. 3. Update beliefs based on evidence, not ego. Bertrand Russell wrote, "Fools are cocksure, while the intelligent are full of doubt." Changing your mind isn't weakness, it's the ultimate sign of intelligence. Sign 3. You ask questions, instead of jumping to conclusions. You've mastered the Anti-Stupidity Protocol. Here are the 5 questions intelligent people constantly ask. What could I be wrong about? Who benefits if I believe this? What's the evidence against my position? Am I confusing correlation with causation? If I'm wrong, how would I know? A Yale study found that critical thinking declines after 45 inches people who don't practice it. This is why scams targeting older adults, work people stop asking questions and assume they know the answers. If you still interrogate your own thinking, you're in the top 10%. Sign 4. You're comfortable being alone. Schopenhauer wrote, "Intelligent people seek silence, fools seek noise." Solitude isn't loneliness. Loneliness is feeling isolated. Solitude is choosing to be alone, to think and recharge. Intelligent people over 50 seek solitude too. Avoid collective stupidity when groups make worse decisions. Process information without social pressure. Think without performing for others. If you turn down meaningless social events to read or think, you understand that your mind is your most valuable asset. Most people fear being alone because it forces them to confront their thoughts. If you're comfortable in your own company, you've built a mind worth spending time with. Sign 5. You prioritize learning over being right. Duke University research shows people over 50 tend to protect their ego over discovering truth. But those who continue learning have brain scans 10 to 15 years younger. The difference. Average person debates to win. Intelligent person debates to understand, asking, "What can I learn?" instead of, "How can I prove them wrong?" Do you only consume content that confirms your beliefs? Or do you seek out challenges? If you're willing to be wrong today to be less wrong tomorrow, you're practicing real intelligence. Sign 6. You understand the limits of your experience. Your brain uses the availability heuristic. It assumes what's easiest to remember is most important. This is why people say, "back in my day," as if personal experience is universal truth. Intelligent people understand. What worked in 1985 might not work in 2025. Personal experience is one data point, not the whole data set. The world changes, and mental models need updating. If you combine your experience with current data, you're using wisdom correctly. If you use experience to avoid learning, you've stopped thinking. Sign 7. You've mastered emotional regulation. After 50, emotional intelligence matters more than IQ. Harvard research shows EQ is the best predictor of happiness in older adults. Emotional regulation means recognizing triggers before you react, not taking everything personally, separating feelings from facts. Carl Jung's shadow work confronting the dark parts you'd rather ignore is what intelligent people have done by 50. The contrast. Average person gets angry at technology, complains about younger generations. Intelligent person stays curious, adjusts expectations, takes responsibility. If you can pause before you react, you've achieved something rare. Sign 8. You can walk away from sunk costs. The sunk cost fallacy, believing that because you've invested time or energy, you must keep going. After 50, this shows up as staying in careers you hate for 30 years. Remaining in toxic relationships because we've been together so long. Refusing new opportunities because I'm too old. Nietzsche talked about Amor, Fati, loving your fate, including mistakes. But that doesn't mean continuing the same mistake. Intelligent people think, I spent 20 years on this, but I don't have to spend 20 more. If you can cut losses fast and see the past as a lesson, not a life sentence, you're thinking like a strategist. Sign 9. You prepare for death by living meaningfully. Existential intelligence, the rarest form of wisdom. Most people avoid thinking about death. Intelligent people practice memento mori. Remember, you will die, and it makes them live better. They ask, if I only had 5 years left, what would I change? Then, they change it now. They focus on legacy over ego, real relationships over status, contribution over accumulation. Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Hedonic adaptation explains why having enough is never enough. Intelligent people escape this trap by realizing meaning comes from contribution, connection, and growth. If you're asking what really matters, you're asking the right question. If you recognized yourself in these signs, you're part of a rare minority people who use time to grow wiser, not just older. How many of these signs did you recognize? Comment below.